I'm Pat Bates, and this is Living on L.O.P. L.O.P. is loss of privileges for misconduct inside of a prison. The lessons former prisoners learned during isolation can be used today, as well as moving forward in our lives. This week, we are featuring the great Cozine Welch, and he's going to tell us about necessity sparking invention.
Well, Rick, sir.
This was the actual first volume there ever was for PCAP spoken words. It was like some of the best writing you're gonna find. Like, this is how it started, and it's so wonderful, right? Because what this did, this volume 1, it was a need that it filled. There was no writing from prisoners in Michigan, and there was no avenue to make it so. They had to forge their own. So PCAP had to make their own review to meet that need.
My name is Cozine Welch. I'm the executive director of A Brighter Way, and I was sentenced to 22 to 40 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. And I'm here to talk about how necessity sparks invention. So in 2008, I was at the Thumb Correctional Facility. And at the time, I had a real interest in sharpening my ability to write poetry in particular. I had already had some experience with music, even so far as like putting on shows, but I really wanted to hone my ability to write poetry. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't have the resource available to me at the institution to do it. There's no classes. But lo and behold, the University of Michigan ended up offering a class in part of their atonement project that was going to teach folks how to become better writers. It was a creative writing workshop. And I was like, oh, this is my chance. Where in prison do you have the University of Michigan or any school at all coming in and teaching people how to be better writers? So I put my kite into the special activities director immediately. Unfortunately, the special activities director thought I was doing too much. At the time, I was the legal writer, and I was also did a couple of performances there, and I was also involved in the music program there. And so she felt that that opportunity should go to someone who hadn't already been doing stuff. And so at the moment, I'm like, I had one shot. Right? Because inside, that doesn't happen. Like, you don't get schools coming in to give you that type of skill. So it's like, what do I do now? So I had to accept that door had closed. And that was hard. But the irony is that when that door had closed, I still had the desire to do what I wanted to do. And so I still wanted to figure out how could I make that happen? So I looked at the resources I had around me. I worked in the law library, which means I had access to some books. Some poetry wasn't contemporary, what have you, but there's scraps everywhere. Atlantic magazine, Atlantic Journal, all scraps of anywhere, newspapers. There's a time I was on the whole, I went to solitary confinement for 6 months, and I was fortunate enough to find 12 volumes of poetry magazine in that, in the small library in the whole, and I devoured it. But what I did was I looked around me. And the irony was that when that door closed, it actually made me better because it opened up a completely new and open pathway. Like, when you go through the door, you're stuck with the rigid confines of the door and its structure, that pathway, those paving stones. You have to stay on them. But when you discard the door, you open everything before you. And the irony is, it's harder because you have to do so much more simultaneously. So I couldn't just take the progressive steps as learning about stanza, right? Of learning about alliteration. I had to learn about all these things at the same time, how words appear on the page, what was the difference between contemporary poetry and other types of poetry, the different genres of poetry, because I'm a hip hop head. I know there's different types of hip hop. Is poetry the same? I had to find all of that out, but the irony is that because I had to do that all at the same time, it created this kind of shortcut. You know what I'm saying? Because it was like the energy I had to invest was therefore that much more, it was multiplied, it was magnified. And so what happens was I ended up developing my own voice. And one of the first things I remember doing was I submitted to the Lit Review. And I found this out, that the University of Michigan, the same place where I was hoping to get the writing program, actually had a literary review magazine, which I would not have found out had I not been searching on my own. And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, this was my shot. Because if you get into this lit review, you can't lose. It's a win-win. If you don't get in, they'll give you critiques on how to make your writing better. And if you do get in, you got in. And so the irony is that And having to go that other route, I actually ended up getting into the lit review because I had to find a way to develop my own poetic voice. And I got that lit review after that, and it was like, oh, now I have more material to get better from, because now I've got a collection of the best writing from people in Michigan. It's like it kept going. So I went around this own path to figure out how to become a better writer, and as I did that, more resources kept coming. And eventually, I ended up doing a better job, I think, than had I actually went to that workshop, because it forced me to be more creative and inventive on how I learned and how I viewed poetry. Like, necessity was what sparked the invention, man. And it invented my voice. Wide-eyed, biting fingernails nervously, bruised rib, swollen eye, aching reminders that going to chow in here can mean more than just going to eat. His legs swing in anticipation of a meager meal 13 hours overdue. They could have just let him rest, but hunger pains never do. Finding your own path makes you better in a couple of ways. The first way is just technically, because when you have less, you have to do more with it. You know, in prison, we tend to find multiple uses for everything. An ink pen is never just for writing a letter. That ink pen has 4 or 5 uses, from everything from writing a letter to holding lead, to holding an important document, to taking the screwdriver off of your fan so you can fix it when it breaks. So you learn that. Like, it's the reason that necessity inspires invention. And invention is something that's created to resolve or solve a problem. So the need is the only way to get the resolution. And so that's why when the door's been closed and you forge your own path, that need is gonna make you create that very thing you needed. It's the irony of it and the beauty at the same time. Like, you know, it's funny because like when you're incarcerated, you become well accustomed and adjusted to making the most out of the least. Right? Like, that's just what you become accustomed to doing, and you develop this habit of having to do more with less and having to put more forward to get equal footing. That need develops an ability to do so. And that's what I did inside. I didn't even recognize at the time that prison, in its weird way, was making me, forcing me, and closing me off from society, and closing that final door was making me better, because it was making me find ways to do the same or more with less. Well, sometimes we like use a joke that, you know, like in our 20 years, however many times we developed this type of energy. You know, people say you look different, you have a glow about you. We sometimes joke that we developed that and stored that because we knew from our experience inside, when we came home, we were gonna have to find a way to do more with less. Necessity was gonna necessitate us inventing and paving our own path. And that's what you can do now. You can take what's around you, find those things that are actually there for you and actually will fulfill that need, and forge your own path with them. Because the door that closed, man, that was one door in the mansion. Fuck that one, go to the next one.